It's December. Yeah, December 1st. Is that crazy, insane, and weird that it's December? It did. It just kind of escaped us. Oh, you seem so far away. I'm going to scoot in just a little bit. Dawn hiking? I thought so. I don't know. Welcome. You guys are real quiet today, but that's okay. Um, most of you have been, yeah, you've been here before, except for Marty. I'm just reading. Yeah, I'm just reading, and then we'll just kind of talk about the concepts or some of the things that struck you while I'm reading about, what we're doing. I don't think I need to tell you guys. It's not exactly when I feel more confident and when I need polish, then I'll go to a critique book group. But right now, I always tell everybody I can't handle criticism very well, so I'll probably just cry if you criticize me right now. I know that that's coming eventually, but I'm more interested in generating ideas in response to the ideas right now because nothing's in final form. And if you remember, we're talking about just the different aspects of the soul. That's the first part of the kind of the second part of the book. The first part, we started with my story and then what I mean by the soul, and then started talking about the characteristics of the soul, which the the first one we talked about last time was the soul is subterranean. And so this time, this chapter is called The Soul is Whole. Okay? The soul is whole. It was Kayla, my firstborn's firstborn, who made me a grandmother. We were all very excited about her arrival, but I wasn't exactly jazzed about calling myself Granny, Grandma, Nana, Meemaw, or anything else that reminded me of oldness. I expected to be awed and excited by the birth, of course, but I was totally unprepared for the instant imprinting that occurred in my heart the moment she was placed in my arms. I felt it in my body. I knew it. I was an instant love slave and happy to be so. Babies are magical beings, all of them, and Kayla was no exception. But at about the 5th or 6th month, we began to notice something about her that seemed exceptional. I say seemed because, of course, I'm biased. I thought she was the most wonderful creature ever to grace the earth, but then I'm the grandmother, so ... Others began to notice it too, like my son-in-law's college friends, former fraternity brothers who aren't exactly gaga for random babies. One young man, after holding eye contact with Kayla for about 10 seconds, was heard exclaiming, "Oh no, not my soul." She could do that to you, see right down to the bottom of your soul. She has enormous blue eyes that even at 6 months of age seem to pull your essence into herself, assess your current state of being, and return you to yourself thoroughly known and more than a little unnerved. Being seen by Kayla was like being in the presence of presence itself, full of wonder and wisdom and pure being. Hanging out with her those first few years, watching her grow, was nothing short of wonderful. She settled the matter of what to call me as she was forming some of her very first words. One day she looked at me and called me Ami, and that's who I've been to the grandkids ever since. When her kindergarten teacher pointed to me and asked, "Is that Grandma?" Kayla replied, "No, that's my Ami." Damn straight, I thought, no grandma here. But I digress. By virtue of our up-close and personal experience, my husband and I completely agree that Kayla arrived in the world with her soul intact, and we are privileged to have lived in her presence. We experienced this infant toddler preschooler as a being who was whole, loving, and full of wonder, with a certain kind of indefinable knowing. Perhaps being a love slave gives one a particular kind of seeing, but anyone in the presence of any child should tell you the same. Children arrive on the earth with their souls intact. This I believe. How is it possible? How can an infant, devoid of knowledge, language, and even the skills to keep itself alive, be considered whole? Believers will quickly tell you it's simple, silly. It's God who infuses each new life with the divine spark. Or if you're not comfortable with God, perhaps you prefer the great mystery, the collective unconscious, or perhaps the reemergence of a soul on its path to nirvana, inhabiting this particular body for one of its many lifetimes. Perhaps they're right, and I should end the chapter here. But for the sake of my fellow pilgrims, secular or otherwise, I press on. Besides, it's easy to consider the innocent godlikeness of the very young, but we all know innocence gets lost along the way, and humans who start off as the visible image of the divine on earth can end up damaged beyond recognition, twisted and grotesquely marred. How can we possibly believe that the soul is whole when we are surrounded by what looks like evidence to the contrary? My personal faith crisis could be understood as the period of time when ownership of my soul transferred from God to myself, something I had been trying to avoid all along. My soul was a religious commodity, something to be saved and spiffed up so that Jesus could properly use it. Since I was acutely aware of the inadequacies of my own character, that concept was a great comfort to me. Now I felt deeply inadequate to assume this responsibility. From the spiritual wasteland of my deconstruction, however, one thought floated up from the depths of my knowing, one shining, hopeful possibility. If I were to put words on this thought floating up from the depths, it would sound like this. Your soul knows what it's doing and always has. Nothing is out of order here. This was my first inkling that my soul is whole. Perhaps you have trouble taking someone's message from the depths as sufficient argument of fact. I don't blame you, neither do I. So for all of our sakes, I do have a few theories I'd like to offer for your consideration in support of my position. These are only theories, mind you. No one knows for sure. Theory 1. God, however we conceive of it, her, him, they, is real after all, and our soul is the part of us that is connected to that, always has been, and always will be. This theory gives me the security of believing there is something big and benign, powerful and kind out there, who has a wealth of wisdom and strength I can draw from. It implies a kind of cosmic belonging and the hope that somebody or something is not freaked out by what's happening on the earth at any given time. In this theory, my soul has a permanent connection to the spiritual realm, and I can draw on its goodness at any time. It also implies an eternal presence, a life beyond this mortal coil. This theory makes it easy to believe that the soul is whole because it suggests that a part of the divine has come to dwell in me uniquely, offering me a portal to all the goodness the divine realm possesses. According to this theory, the soul develops inside us and stands ready to craft a uniquely embodied, yet gloriously divine expression of humanity on the earth. Based on this theory, it follows that of course the soul is whole, since it's connected to the divine and stands ready to infuse us with its wisdom and goodness whenever we're ready for it. In this way, all the damage done to the psyche or the ego can be resolved, healed, and integrated into the best version of ourselves possible. Since the soul is semi-divine, this wholeness is available to us at any moment. This theory makes me want to exhale a very satisfied and hopeful sigh. That's all. Doesn't it? Theory number 2. The soul is pure awareness in the present moment. Experts in the field of mindfulness and contemplation have written about this for centuries, the idea that apart from the constructs of place, time, and judgments, a plane of pure awareness exists within us, the ability to be fully present in the immediate present without judgment. In this plane of pure awareness, pure being, all is as it should be. All is, in fact, perfect, since without judgment, the present moment just is. When one experiences the present moment just as it is, one enters into the experience of it, which, when welcomed, is full of wonder and acceptance. The soul could be defined as both the plane of pure awareness as well as the innate capacity to experience this awareness. Awareness plus the awareness of awareness, if you will. Should I stop on that one? Should we stop on that for a second? So Just take a second and be aware of your body right now and of the room that we're in. Just take a second and, find your toes and look around you and kind of just crank up your awareness for a second. Hello. And now, step back for a second and be aware of the self that is being aware. So think about you sitting here being aware. That's the awareness of awareness. Okay? Kind of confusing. I like this theory because it lends credibility to my experience of Kayla as being somehow whole even as an infant. Babies come into the world as embodied presence. They are only physically and emotionally aware. That's all they are. And they express this awareness in non-cognitive ways. We watch them experience and express wonder, joy, connection, and pleasure with their whole selves. They are little sponges absorbing their world. This awareness has a quality of wisdom about it, an expression of all rightness with the world and with the self that is palpable. Therefore, if the soul is our capacity to return to pure awareness, the wholeness of each present moment is available to us at any time and stands as a resource in our poor beleaguered lives. It's as if at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is that I am. I like it. This theory reminds me of one of my favorite Bible stories, a very dramatic but odd encounter between Moses and God on Mount Sinai, in which God supposedly walks in front of Moses, who's safely tucked into the cleft of the rock, while God declares his name. I am, he says, or more precisely, I am that I am, or I am and that is all. Okay. The mystery and the drama of this story get me every time. What an odd thing to say, I am that I am, and what a strange name for God, I think. I am that I am. Wow. Now there's a statement. How am I supposed to respond to that, I ask myself. Well, what can I say, I answer. He's God. If he wants to be the I am, then he gets to be the I am. God could call himself George if he wanted because, well, he's God, isn't he? Kind of like Beyonce. She walks into a photo shoot dressed in a golden gown with a golden halo-like device behind her head, and we think, yep, that's Beyonce. She wears what she wants, says what she wants, does what she wants. Her whole brand is a powerful declaration of I am in whatever she does, and there's very little we can do about it. I am is the ultimate mic drop moment. It shuts down the conversation. What are you supposed to say after someone says, I am? I am is for special beings like God and Beyonce, I conclude. It has nothing to do with me because I'm nothing special like either one of them. And I'm right back where I started. But what about this? What if, instead of a story about a literal encounter between Moses and God that tells us what we already knew anyway, that God is magnificent and can call himself whatever he wants, what if this passage is giving us a glimpse of the powerful nature of beingness itself? What if this passage is trying to say that being is sufficient, magnificent, and complete in itself, and that the experience of pure being would be so powerful that it would make us think that you had to be God to have it? What if our own calling is to experience the pure, glorious awareness of being, I am, in our own unique way, moment by moment throughout our lifetime? What if I am is the best expression of my own soul? Well, if so, then I am would shut down the normal conversations about who, what, when, why, and how. I am would refuse explanations, declaring them irrelevant, since I am is the only important thing. I am would suspend the illusion of time because it's not I was or I will be, but I am. I am leaves no room for judgment. Not I am good or I am bad or I am kinda okay, just I am. I am lets the inquiring mind go hungry. I am does not answer the inquiring mind. Indeed, it will not be mastered by the mind at all. Instead, I am reorients and instructs the mind. I am might be the door to a reality that is not governed by the narrative in which we normally live. I am would allow us to simply be present, awake, aware, experiencing, absorbing, observing, alive, and open-hearted. I am would allow us to experience our own unique and innate wholeness. I am would allow us to accept and embrace what is. I am declares that the experience of being is primary, essential, and powerful. I am declares that being is sufficient. Perhaps the soul is the part of us that experiences the whole of being and presence in the present moment. Beyond that, perhaps the soul is the part of us that knows not only that being is always enough, but that being is actually powerful to the point of transcendence. What about that? Theory number 3. The soul is a repository of all that is good within us. So maybe you're skeptical of all this woo-woo stuff, God, the plane of pure awareness, or the great I am. I don't blame you. Part of me is right there with you, skeptical to the core. Let's come back down to earth for a moment. What if there is nothing out there greater than ourselves? What is the soul then? Do we have to buy the existence of something supernatural in order to interact with our souls? Undeniably, parts of the psyche are damaged, wounded, frozen in time. Thanks to neuroscience, we're starting to understand that these fragmented parts of the self are clusters of neurons in the brain that organize themselves around beliefs in response to early experiences. These apparently damaged subselves contain unresolved pain and suffering from past experiences, as well as reactive beliefs that for the most part are not true in the present. Nevertheless, they continue to govern choices we make and how we see the world and ourselves. Is that all there is to us? If so, how do we explain healing, resilience, and our penchant for overcoming adversity? Perhaps, despite all the negative experiences of our past, there exists a part of the brain that collects, synthesizes, and integrates all the data from all the parts of the brain/mind and sifts through it, collecting and holding on to whatever is adaptable and truthful. What if in addition to all the fragmented parts, there's also a repository of goodness anchored in the present, in the body, in the heart, and the intuition, instead of the immediately conscious mind? I mean, if there's part of the brain and part of the mind that collects all the negative stuff, couldn't there be a part of the brain or the mind that sifts through all of that and holds on to the good? That's what I'm trying to say. What if an evolved part of the brain acts as a filter, separating out the clusters of negative meaning and retaining a repository of adaptive perspective based on all of the highest human values that have evolved over time to enable the human race to overcome its baser instincts? And what if that repository can organize itself and be accessed as a source of resilience and integration? Maybe the soul is simply the brain's evolved capacity to maintain an integrated, resilient identity formed by a fierce attachment to adaptive human values in the midst of life's experiences, expressed in a unique way as us. Well, we can work with that. Regardless if any or all of these theories are true, the idea that my soul is whole is a powerful game changer. If I know that the best part of me is always present, serenely attentive, and readily accessible, I know that I have everything I need at any moment. If I know my soul is whole and indestructible, I can face anything inside myself with confidence. All the emotions my ego believes will crush me, All the stories I tell myself that terrify me can at last be safely faced because the soul cannot be damaged. I can allow them to surface in the presence of my soul, who knows the truth about myself, unaffected by all my internal voices that have up to this point caused me to cower in fear and shame. If my soul is whole, I can yield to its purpose, which is bringing all the parts of me into alignment with my essential nature. If my soul is whole, then it is not at risk by any misstep I may make. If my soul is whole, I have a way to move into my life with courage, compassion, and hope. But best of all, if my soul is whole, I can let go of my ego's prime directive: protect the precious at all costs, because the precious does not need protection anymore. The precious is here to protect me. One of our family's favorite films is the 1997 science fiction cult classic, The Fifth Element, starring Bruce Willis and Mila Jovovich. Raise your hand if you've, okay. Go see it if you haven't. Find it. You can't go see it. You have to. The future of the world is under grave threat, of course, in need of the intervention of a supreme being, a divine light, a weapon against the great evil that is imminent. This supreme being comes to Earth incognito in the form of a young woman named Lilu, with great skin and orange hair. Upon escaping from the lab in which she has been reconstructed, she accidentally lands in a flying taxicab piloted by Corbin Dallas, played by Bruce Willis, when he still had a little bit of hair. The film brilliantly portrays Lilu as a gifted but naive and vulnerable young woman who must quickly absorb the history, knowledge, and skills she will need to navigate her existence in this timeline. Corbin Dallas is motivated to help her complete her mission, whatever it is, mostly because he's powerfully attracted to her, that great skin, you know, and because he has a soldier's instinct to protect her obvious vulnerability. At one point in the movie, during a heated battle from which he desperately wants to protect her, Lilu turns to him and says, "I'm the fifth element, the supreme being. I'm here to protect you." We are stunned by the irony of this statement, as we are meant to be. Nevertheless, it proves to be true. Powerful and at the same time vulnerable, Lilu saves the world from ultimate evil. Like Corbin Dallas, we have no idea that the precious, far from being weak and in need of protection, turns out to be immensely powerful, capable of protecting us. This revelation is a game changer, the point on which my relationship with my soul radically pivots. No longer do I consider my prime directive to be protect the precious at all costs, as if the soul's vulnerability makes it weak. Instead, if I know the soul to be whole and indestructible, I can instead begin to allow the precious to protect, as well as inform, nourish, strengthen, and sustain me. Therein lies a heap of good news. So that's the chapter. And so I'm curious if you got lost, or if you have questions, or first of all, just some kind of raw reactions or thoughts, and what you think of the theories and which one seems to resonate with you, and just anything that you want to respond with.
Well, I like the theory. I don't know that I truly believe that the soul can be damaged, though, because I know so many people that are so, you know?
Yeah.
So, I would love to believe that. I just don't know how to reconcile that with
I know.
all the damage I see.
I think that's the hardest part. What does get damaged if the soul's not damaged? There's clearly damage, right?
Yeah.
There's clearly damage in the world and damaged people. So the soul can't be damaged, then what's happening?
The last thing you said about allowing the precious to protect you, if you're not so worried about it, you can listen to it. And if you're busy trying to protect it, maybe you're smothering it. You know, maybe the soul can't be damaged, but it can be ignored or smothered
Or disconnected
decided,
from,
yeah.
certainly, yeah.
I think there's tremendous evidence that the soul cannot be damaged, in that there is so much damage and destruction happening all the time, particularly recently in our backyard, and yet people get up in the morning.
Yeah.
People get up in the morning, people resume their positions and go through their day with some understanding that they will now get through this day. And it's that propelling force in the midst of damage that is evidence that the soul stays intact, in my thinking.
Yeah. Yeah, that was one of the things that I thought, clearly there's all kinds of people and all kinds of damage. So there are people that just get, they seem like this one's broken beyond repair, and of course, look what they've been through, kind of thing. And then there are people who have been through so much, and then look who they are. So how does that exactly work? And a lot of this happens unconsciously too. Like even like you were saying, the people who have so much trauma or so much damage and yet get up and do what needs to be done, as Gerson Keeler would say. And then the ones who think of the people. So let's think of the people who have suffered some of the worst things in history, and yet they give us the most incredible gifts.
In fact, it's that capacity to use suffering in order to bring about upliftment in another that may be going through something similar, that is so much evidence of the soul navigating through the body. And there's a million examples.
I know, we're surrounded by them, aren't we? Yeah. I'm thinking of Viktor Frankl is a famous one, went through the Holocaust, and yet there was something that could not be taken from him, and basically wrote his whole book around that we don't have to sacrifice. There's some part of us that no one can take from us. And I worked one time with a woman who had been through worse things. I wouldn't even speak out loud the things that she'd been through. And working with her, she said, yeah, there just was a part of me I wasn't going to let them have. They weren't going to let me. I wasn't going to let them have that part of me. And they tried. They systematically, intentionally tried to dismantle her and own her in the most evil way I've ever heard of. And they couldn't. They didn't, because she kept that part of herself alive. And it was there. She had to, she just knew it was there. And so those stories kind of have to give us pause too. What is that? And why do some people emerge and some people don't?
Right, yeah. Not to be negative, but there's some people that greed and revenge gets them up in the morning.
Yeah. So getting up in the morning isn't exactly the
right. Especially
isn't the standard for whether you have a soul or not.
I thought of, did you ever see Cat on a Hot Tin Roof?
No.
There's Paul Newman plays this just hopeless alcoholic, and his father adores him. He's always been the favorite child, and his father's just at the end of his rope. He's helped him so many times, and this guy is just bent on destruction. And he said, "What? Why don't you just kill yourself? I mean, you know, I just don't understand." And he said, "Dad, if I killed myself, I couldn't drink anymore." You know, and I mean, that's his whole motivation.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know? But there are people like that.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, yeah.
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 Yeah, we had this discussion at House of Refuge one time last year about resilience. Like, some people were like, "Well, I'm not resilient." Well, like, yes, you are, because you got up and you came here. You know, but there are the people that don't, that do just drink themselves to death. You know, so there is both sides to that. I don't.
So I hear you're still not buying it.
I think there's
Well, if you could
something-
tell me that it's something else besides the soul that's damaged, then I could buy that.
Oh
So
yeah,
what is it?
oh yeah. The psyche is damaged. The self is damaged. The ego is damaged. You
That's
know,
what I was thinking.
there's plenty of damage to go around. And I think, yeah, the brain is damaged. The genes are altered through trauma. You know, people are bent and twisted and evil and rotten and selfish beyond measure, and you know, there's plenty of damage to go around. So, and you could argue maybe that they're irredeemable, or that there's nothing there. But my whole idea, this is kind of like one of the basic ideas that I have, is that any person at any time can begin to listen to and access a part of them that's been there all along, that's always there. Even if all that is just the ability to be present and to, you know, step back and to push all that away and to access what's left, you know, kind of like we did with the exercise of, oh, now there's someone who's aware that I'm being aware, you know, that kind of neutral presence, even if that's all that is. Everybody has the ability to do that.
And is your belief that with all the different things you just mentioned that get damaged, the reason the soul doesn't get damaged is because it was always with us?
Yeah.
And when we went back to the Kayla.
Yeah, I think so. You know, so my idea is that if we come into the world with just this exquisite, you know, set of raw materials and consciousness and awareness and innocence and all of the best things, did you ever wonder why babies are just, their natural state is joyful, and their natural state is loving, and their natural state is wonder? Like, where does that come from? You know, I think just awareness is like conjures up that sense of awe and wonder just about being alive. And they're not even processing that consciously. You know what I'm saying? It's just, they're just soaking in their environment and their attachment and their it wakes up this sense of love and this sense of attachment. So I think we come into the world that way, but that part of us needs some way to kind of interact with the world, because the world is such a shrunk down version of that kind of expansive glory, so to speak, or wonderfulness, or etherealness. It's just so immense that we need a way to interact with and shorthand it, you know. So that's what we learn. We learn how to build a self. We learn how to organize thoughts. We learn how to talk and walk and move and interact with people and experiment and play and work and read, and all of these things they're quickly happening. They happen so fast. And behind all of that still, or underneath all of that, is this part that holds and undergirds it, but it is it doesn't really, it's sort of like the difference between thought and words, in between words and letters on the page. You know, you get how these big ideas have to be kind of concentrated and shorthanded. So thought and awareness turned into words, you have to kind of distill these things down, ideas down into words, and then words have to be broken down into letters and language. And then maybe you can communicate something, but the thing that you're communicating is so condensed and so small compared to the thing you're trying to represent. Does that make sense? So, like, that's the self that we need to interact with the world with is so condensed down and so concentrated that it's going to miss something. And if the world that we are born into is kind of rough and tumble, or is destructive or toxic, or if what we need to be healthy, whole individuals is not available to us, then this part has to kind of keep up and find a way to adapt and find a way to just get along in the world. And so it constructs these aspects of ourselves that interact with the world. And that gets shaped by interaction and by events and by people. And that's the part that's online. It's like the front office. And in our vulnerability, like we talked about last time, I think, or the first couple times, our vulnerability gets assaulted. You know, the innocence gets assaulted. And that's really uncomfortable and scary. And so the mind and the brain figure out how to protect ourselves from that, how to learn from that, how to defend ourselves, how to come up with how to protect that vulnerability by offering the world something else instead. And so then that part gets the authority to run the life. And so in a sense we let the soul step back, or we don't know what we're doing there. It's not like we're intentionally going, oh, this is too dangerous, I think I'll protect this precious part and step up with this powerful part instead. But that's instinctively what we're doing. And then we depending on how it's going, you know, and how many bewildering things happen to shock us, we put more distance between that precious part of us and the part that's out here trying to survive and learn and, you know, interact. And so the degree to which there's a discrepancy between the ego and the soul, then this gap, you know, gets wider and wider, and we forget that there's something else, because there's no one reflecting it back to us. Like, if we're surrounded with loving, soulful, wonderful people, they're always reflecting back to us our value and our safety and our, you know, our preciousness and our capabilities and our connections to the world. That's what feeds us and feeds our soul and makes us grow healthy. But if we don't have that, and we're scared to be in the world because it's too vulnerable, then we figure out we create something that can interact in that kind of an environment. And so we get this big gap. And then out here, if you don't know that there's anything else, if you don't have resources, if you sort of feel like this is all there is, if you have a scarcity mentality, then you better, by God, figure out how to get what's yours, you know, or how to hide, or how to manipulate, or how to tap dance, or how to exchange what you have in order to get what you need. This is what the soul is this is what the ego is all about. How do I survive, get what I need, collect it, get more? How do I survive? How do I, and depending on, like I said, the environment that you're in, there's either desperation or safety, and desperation makes people desperate. So they just keep doing what they think works, or they keep doing the only thing they know to do. And so that doesn't necessarily represent what's true, but it's what is. And so a lot of damage can get done out there in the world, interacting with toxic events and people and tragedy and trauma and abuse and distorted, all kinds of stuff. So to me, that's where the damage happens there. And if we're already disconnected from our soul, then this is all we are, this is all we have, and so we have to then leverage that to not, be defeated or whatever.
So this is interesting because what you read were these three concepts, but we end up actually talking about is the basic premise. The three concepts are almost like incidental. We are really more interested here in talking, does that concept even seem true to us?
Yeah.
And so it's like an assumption for the three concepts that it is.
Yeah.
And here we're talking, is it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And both are really interesting. We already are exploring that underlying concept, but then there were the three ways to look at it and figure out how to best structure that model that we can think of that essence, what it really is. And both are just so worth our thoughts and exploration for deeper understanding. But I was ready to think about the three concepts, how they illustrate my vision, or how they mesh with my vision. But then just the basic concept is the soul really something that cannot be damaged? Is it always there undamaged? That's
Yeah. Well, and I would love to get on. Was somebody, you going to say something?
I'll wait till you're done.
Well, I was just going to say, because I never really believed that for real outside of a religious system. So when everything crashed, I was like, what the hell am I going to do now? Wow. If it's all up to me, then I'm screwed forever. And everything, I just felt like I cannot be healed, I cannot be whole, which is the only thing I ever wanted. And so if I couldn't access God, which I wasn't sure existed anyway, or maybe did, but I broke the rules, so I can't, I was just in this very confused state, then the idea that my soul got me here, like there's something underneath everything. There's something underneath everything that knows exactly what it's doing. Mm-hmm. And you're here in this moment of collapse because I'm here, kind of that sort of speaking to me. And then that made me think, okay, then all is not lost. All is not lost. And I don't need to be saved in the same way that I felt like I needed to be saved. And I just mean in a very narrow, like religious sense. As if I'm completely hopeless, and we are all completely hopeless, and only God can save us, and by God we better get it right, or else all is lost. It was more this sense of, hold on, there is meaning, there is something that undergirds, and there's a part of me that has known all along exactly what it's doing. It's just not telling me about it. It's just not talking to me the way I wanted to talk to me. And so then this one idea was the whole pivot. It was like the pivot of my whole life, was this idea that just because it doesn't speak English, or doesn't give me the 5 steps, or doesn't doesn't communicate the way I want it to, doesn't mean it's not there and I can't understand or cannot connect with it or can't let it emerge in a way that's actually drawing me toward the thing that I've been pushing for all along, which is this sense of wholeness and a sense of kind of sanity and congruence and authenticity, in the world. And so
maybe our understanding of what's damaged is really too rigid. Maybe by some definition we can be quite damaged, but not.
yeah.
I love what you're saying, because I missed the beginning. I'm sorry. Somebody in the parking lot bringing something, but first I want to say I'm trying to take care of the beep. Are you guys noticing the beep? Is anyone noticing it? It's driving me fucking crazy. And I forgot. I did work on it this week, and then I forgot to follow up on it. And it's not our neighbors, it's our landlord's issue. So I just messaged them and said, I am here, and that beep is making damaging my soul.
Is there a beep?
Yeah.
There's a beep.
I know. I'm like transformer.
But I had the same reaction as Teresa, and then Alina, that the damage thing, I was like,
Yeah.
and but I know exactly what you're meaning. I love the reframing of what the damage is. And just thinking, coming from faith tradition and framework, that fundamentally is that our soul is bad.
Yeah.
I mean,
We're born
it is
evil.
just in there in the deepest place. And not everybody comes from that, but those of us that do, it really messes with us. And I had that huge theological shift years ago and got in a ton of trouble for it. And I believe it. I believe what you're saying. I would, there's different ways to say it, but that idea of ultimately, there is this part of us that is all these things. And it is perfect, and it is whole, and it is complete, and it is all those things that we were taught as. And all the things that cover it up need to be uncovered. But to blame it on that instead of blaming it on our essence. Mm-hmm. And to own that. And that is a huge shift when everything around certain systems, but this is, I think this has been people's experience, that not just from Christianity, just believing we're bad.
Yeah.
But coming from that, I was just, as you were talking, the part that I heard, and then when you were sharing, it's like the forces against it are so strong.
Yeah.
They're so strong, and every part wants to come back to, no, too damaged, too messed up, too whatever, the twos that are not true, but they feel so true. And if we could separate that out, not to pick it apart and formalize it, because you can't do that, but just put it in its right place.
Yep. Yeah, we're not denying, and it sounds so naive when people say there's good in everyone. It sounds really naive when you look around with any sort of practical eyes, but it's actually true. It's just, how does that?
Well, we're here to be mirrors for that in one another. Mm-hmm. I feel like that's our divine mission, is to be able to hold up that reflection that lets people know that that's really the essence of who they are, not the ego that's constantly trying to get and assemble and accumulate and achieve. And we have a physical symbol of that sitting in the White House right now. Mm-hmm. And we also are able to see that what's propelling that is vulnerability, because the ego knows it's not the real essence of who we are. Its job is to be a servant.
Yeah.
And it's taken over, and it's its days are numbered in a sense. It's vulnerable, and so there's that consciousness of scarcity. I got to have more to solidify my beingness. If I accumulate more, I'll be able to feel myself as being more. And it's crap. It's bullshit. It's not true. And I feel like our practice, my practice right now, is in learning to listen to something other than that. And we talked about resilience, and I think resilience is a symptom of self-propulsion, and that's what ends me up going in circles. It doesn't actually work. It's about stopping all of that for me and getting in touch with something else. And so the question for me isn't so much is the soul damaged or not, but is how do I disentangle my relationship from that which thought it was boss, which is the small s self, so that I can hear what the gentle instruction is of that which is waiting in the wings to inform me. And the more I practice that, the more that becomes relevant for me, the more I'm able to be a presence for other people in my world, which I described as divine mission. I don't mean to get biblical around that. You know, that's
Heaven
not
forbid.
It's not, it's not how my mind works. It's not even it's not on my agenda. But just to really be able to, all those twos, the too damaged, all the uns, the unworthy, the unvalued, the unloved, that all is part of the fabric of who we are, we get to help each other untangle that.
Yeah.
You know, that's what we get to be for one another. But we can't give what we don't have. So we have to first be able to listen to that capital S. Call it self, call it source, call it spirit, call it soul. It's all these S's.
Yeah.
They all work. But we have to start getting that. And you used the word listen to earlier. And it does involve a listening. And cutting through the clamor is not easy. It's not easy. There's there's a lot of reasons why it's there. You know, I went through my life holding a shield. I had to hold a shield. I've let the shield go. Probably enough.
The part is too, you know this as much as you reflect, and I always remember the story of my friend, and he's amazing, and I was with him a long time, reminding him, reflecting back to him who he really was. But it wasn't until something happened inside him
right,
that he finally believed that. And when it happened, it was awesome, because just watching, like, I am worth something.
Yeah.
Like, my soul is good. Mm-hmm. You know, you could put whatever. But when that happened, and I remember, oh my gosh, I've been telling you this for how many years, you know, and you have all these sources that kind of, so you can only do so much, but we had to do it, because he still wouldn't have gotten to where he was without all those years of really not listening to me and to other people. But if we wouldn't have ever told him, he would have never had that reflected back to him. And then it was like an integration. It was a perfect example of an integration, like where it just all came together. And it doesn't mean he's not human and there's not all these things about it, but that core thing shifted. And when that shifts, I mean, it is pretty magical.
That's the core of recovery.
Mm-hmm. It is.
Yeah. It's really neat to hear you give new words to what I was taught at Naropa, which is a Buddhist-inspired university. We talk about the inherent sanity or innate goodness or inherent worth of people or the ground of their being, and those are all sort of ways that they talk about this wholeness that's the goodness that's inside us that can't be damaged. And the soul language actually speaks, more deeply to me, because that's sort of my background, so it makes sense.
Oh, good.
But it's neat to have that sort of the foundation of the counseling that I practiced and learned kind of reflected here again. And you also sort of touched on something that When I was in high school, I was talking with one of my Hindu friends, and I asked her about God and what she thought about God, and she said, well, I believe there's this like giant flame, and we're each just like a little candle from that flame. And sort of the way you talked about the soul sounds like that as well. So it was kind of bringing together all these different parts of what I've learned.
Yeah,
And did you
thinking
always?
of,
Sorry.
I was going to say, thinking of your program, of course, I went to Denver Seminary, and we were taught things like total depravity and original sin,
Those helpful things.
but
But
I also discovered during that time that there was original goodness.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you look at the 7 days of creation, what's God's comment on everything?
It's good.
It's good. And so even before original sin was original goodness. And then even with Paul, he talks about how there's this wood, hay, and stubble thing, but there's going to be a refining by fire, and there's still a gold that's left. And so it's like there's still this goodness there. And then I have this computer background too, and I always think about, when you have a computer that completely quits working, what do you do? Pull the plug, start over. There's some original goodness in that computer somehow. Right? You can completely deconstruct everything you were working on. And then there's still, at the basis, there's still this original goodness called
Yeah, but you have to
bootstrap.
flash a new operating system onto it.
Well, it's true. Sometimes it gets totally corrupted, I suppose. But that's, the flaw of man-made things. But there is a sense in which that could be how we are, that there's a part of us that just never gets corrupted.
Marty.
I was just wondering if you, because I had some of that same background, that even while I was still on the big ship of Christianity, I had that like aha change, paradigm shift of like, no, we are not born evil and born. Through some different conversations and books, I was like, no, we were basically good, and life kind of throws shit at us, and stuff. But I wondered if you kind of always had that, or if you had to have a shift in your life.
Oh, I was thinking about that too. So my first 7 years, was in a hilltop station, a hill station in India, sort of in a very rural, very isolated area where everyone knew my family and my grandparents, and so I was always safe. I always had this, I was courageous, and I had a sense of security. I could go anywhere and do anything. And so that was my first 6 years, and then we moved to Central California, to Fresno, and all of that went away. I didn't have any security. I didn't have any friends. I didn't have any place I could be free. I didn't, and so that's when my sort of ego took over, and I stopped being able to listen to my soul, because it was just everything was just so sad and so scary. But I started out with that, and so I had enough of it that I've been able to come back. Yeah.
I have a question. I feel like a poser. I just totally feel like a poser. So I'm like, oh shit. Because listening to whatever that internal thing is that, I'm having trouble reconciling the difference between that resilience, no, I'm not gonna lay down and die, and ego, and the language of protecting the precious. It's not clicking with me for whatever reason, but maybe it's because I'm distracted with something else, but
I've seen it in at least two different ways, and there are myriads of ways. One, that I've worked with people who have addictions, and especially with opiates, and so they just that opiate sort of just takes them away from any sort of sense of being connected with their soul or with their core, and so it's more of a forgetting and a sort of numbing that they do. And then I have other people that I've worked with who just keep going. They're just always busy. They're just always doing the next thing, and that keeps them from ever having to pause to face whatever feelings might be there that then I think would keep them from connecting with their soul. And so there are a number of different ways I think that
that we choose to isolate ourselves from our soul, that we build sort of coping walls or coping blocks.
It's important, and also when we pause and get quiet, it's not as if we pause and get quiet and suddenly the soul starts shouting.
No.
We pause and get quiet, and the first thing we become aware of is the pain, the trauma, and the shit.
Yeah.
And so we have to stay in that place long enough for that to begin to energetically dissipate, so that then something else can begin to emerge. But that's usually when we quit.
Yes, because that's painful.
Yeah.
I keep saying this over and over in the last 5 years, is where I got this concept was from Janine Roth's book, Women, Food, and God. Because she goes through this whole experience of walking people through, teaching people how to deal with strong emotions, which is basically what you just said. So you notice this feeling that you're having, you notice it in your body, you let go of the story of the feeling, and then you climb right inside the sensation of it, and then it's like you step into the plane of awareness where it's just a feeling. It's just
It no longer
thought.
hurt you or overwhelm you.
And and she'll say once you get there, then you're making the connection to that which can never be damaged. So it's kind of on the other side, like you said, of the pain and the shit, is this what? And it's not even goodness. So like
It's more neutral.
yes, the thing is not that we want to connect with the part of us that's good, although it's undeniably good. It's that we want to step back even further from that. It's the part of us that has no judgment, that just is. And that's where the power is. It's nice to be good instead of bad. It's nice to feel worthwhile instead of worth less, but you're still on the same plane. You're still telling your ego you're good instead of bad, or you're safe instead of unsafe, or you're this instead of that. It's still the same plane. And so the soul exists on another, like the whole different, and it can't be reduced down to those kinds of judgments. And so you have to kind of experience it, like Hope was saying, and you can't really experience it until either you've, like Father Thomas Keating would say, either through meditation or suffering. That's the only two ways to connect with the soul. Because
Step right up.
so hey, no wonder nobody really wants it, right? And so the beauty of suffering is that it pushes you all the way to the edge and the end, and then you're willing to consider something else, something else. So the reason why I like to put this here is that, because I felt like I got pushed to the very edge. Like I came into the world feeling like, God, there's something wrong with me. If there wasn't, they would surely love me.
Right.
Like they would surely love me. So it must be me. And then when I got saved, it was like, oh God, thank goodness, okay, I'm shit. Yes, I get it. I don't, but now I can be redeemed. So I can just not be me and, that whole exchange. So that was a very powerful thing for me, because at the bottom I felt like I don't have a sense of safety or wholeness. Never created one for whatever reason. So that was my ticket. And then when that collapsed, then shit, what do I do now? Because I'm not behaving correctly, like I've lost my right to have the access to the thing. And so that was this. That's why it's really hard for me to describe the devastation of my faith shift, because it was like cut me off from access to anything that I was looking for. And so that's when I heard that little bubble up from the bottom, like, nothing's wrong here. You're right on time. It's exactly right. That has to crash. You're going to be, that kind of a thought, and then the connection to, maybe there's something in there still that if all is lost, then I can be taught a different way. I can learn a different way, and it can form me in a different way. So, don't know why I started saying all of that. Out here on a limb now, going.
Well, I think we got started when you were mentioning that phrase about protecting the precious, and that's
okay.
confusing for you. I went. Were you through talking about that, or do you have some more thoughts on that? Or
I'm
she's a little brain dead.
a little fog.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to also just offer a little story. Because go back to Kayla. I witnessed the first shock when she discovered that the world is not safe. It just kills me. It just
so
kills
hard to
me.
watch.
She was probably about 14 months old, and we had taken her to Cherry Creek Mall because they have that play place that's really
Has the bacon and eggs,
like
and stuff.
bacon and eggs and things on there. And she just was the most loving little child. And there's this little slide there, and all the little toddlers were climbing up the slide and going down, and climbing up the slide and going down. And some kids were coming up the wrong way, and she was getting confused by that. And then she was climbing up the steps, and some kid just elbows her off the thing. And she just went. I could just see it on her face, like this shock, like what, this incomprehension.
Yeah, and she picked herself up and just stood
And
there.
she was
kind of in
stunned.
shock. You could see the
She
stun.
was stunned for a
trying
couple
to
of
integrate
minutes.
this experience.
Like, what's happening? Why would anyone do this? She doesn't have even words to say these things. But why would someone do it? What am I supposed to do now? Like her assumption of love in the universe, in this exchange, in this safety, and this, we all play together and we're all fine kind of thing. Just boom, just like that. And I just watched her. Those big blue eyes just kind of go like this, and she just stood there stunned. And so it helped me understand that this is how children learn things, because they just throw themselves into the world and then something happens, and then it's this kind of shock. Or like, my first day of kindergarten, let's get up and get her. No, we don't do that. Like this sense of connection to your own perceptions and your own sense of safety and your own sense of being loved and belonging, just by sometimes the most benign kinds of things are shocks to the system. So the shock is the thing that makes us want to protect, because it hurts. It hurts. It's so we don't want to feel that again. So that's what I mean by protecting the precious, is kind of letting that step back and then kind of going, oh, it's not the way I thought it was. Like, all these little children aren't all very safe. Like some will like shove their way through. That's not good. That hurts me, And of course, this is not cognitive. This is happening at a really deep level. So that's just an illustration of how some part goes, well, that didn't work. Well, that was stupid. Well, that's not going to happen anymore. Well, now I need to watch out for whatever. And you start having these defensive strategies because you're protecting this vulnerability. So that was very much my experience, too, in the world, and how I felt about myself, that there's some, in my place in the family as being the sensitive one and the blah, 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 blah. So it's like no one's protecting that, so I'm going to protect that by whatever. So hiding or succeeding or tap dancing or, whatever becomes a strategy for getting along in the world, but also protecting the tender parts from being exposed to an unsafe world. So should we talk about the theories? If you remember what they are.
I need a review.
Theory number 1 is it's God silly. So of course. So if God fixes a lot of things, you don't have to work, you don't have to think so hard. And if God is just there magically doing things. God is the source of all good, so then we're good. So then the soul is good, and so then there it exists. Theory number 2 is the awareness of is that place of awareness, that place of like that this that in the present moment and being aware of the present moment there is wholeness. And theory number 3 is maybe alongside the part of us that collects the damage is the part of us that actually siphons out wholeness. So I don't know if any of those are true, but I'm just thinking through them. I kind of believe actually all 3. That's kind of my personal thing, is I think all 3 are true and combined in some way, but
Which is why it's in your book.
yeah, I get to decide, right?
It's your choice.
I get to
What you put
decide.
in there. The third one feels the most like strange for me, or so the one I have the most resistance to, and I think it's because there's something about the first 2 that I think the soul like is already seeped in goodness and already has this like fullness, richness of present moment, yumminess that it's not like it's picking out moments from my history or from my past and keeping those, like it already had it all.
Mhm.
There's something about like that it's the idea of it's collecting them that doesn't make sense to me, because for me it's already all there.
Yeah.
So I guess that's the one I have the most.
Oh,
I
I
don't
do
quite
too.
get it.
That's the one I have the most trouble with. But what I want is to give people because I want to get past the how can this work?
Right.
Why is this possibly true? To the if that's true, then what do I do? You know? So I kind of want to get people past the getting stuck on the intellectual, conversation. It's like I give you the theories as like gate, because the mind wants to, you got to feed them a little, it's like the Doberman pinscher at the gate, you throw them a little steak and then you get to go climb the fence.
I actually like the third one. I felt pretty comfortable with it. I think it's just the stage that I'm in right now. I know we all move through different parts of the journey, but the first 2 were more spiritual.
Yeah.
And the third one, it was more if you don't believe in any supernatural power at all whatsoever, which in some ways I'm kind of at right now.
Uh-huh.
I probably won't always be. I don't know, but that it's all about synapses and brain activity and stuff. That kind of makes sense.
Yeah, that's why I like it too. And
Yeah.
it's like, because if the price of connecting with your own soul is that you have to believe X, Y, and Z about the supernatural, then you either have to spend time getting it right. I spent 35 years getting it right so that I could understand it properly. You know what I'm saying? Spent my time doing that instead of connecting with my own soul. So I would really like to save people all of that useless mental activity, without just, with also respecting them enough to say, here's how it might work. So pick your theory if you need to, and get on with, listening. And because if you can get on with listening, and practicing and framing the way you're living so that it's moving you, then you're getting somewhere. Because the stories are just stories, theories are just theories. It's the movement of the real thing that we're looking for. Does that make sense?
Bless you.
And I'm guessing once people have an experience of hearing something, listening to it or trusting it or following it at some point, that there'll be a magic that's their own, that seems unbelievable, but is a visual experience that they can come back to.
Yeah, I'm hoping so. Like if I can lay out the basic concepts and then say, if these things are true, then look at your own life now. And if we put the lens on your own life, that your soul has always been there, kind of gently inviting, gently speaking to you, and calling your attention every once in a while, can we string those beads on a string and see a coherent process for you? I can kind of do that for myself. But if we don't know that, if we don't think that, then everything's random and nothing makes sense, kind of in I'm back where I started. But when that thought came to me, like, your soul's known what it's been doing the whole time, then I can kind of go back and go, oh, so when this and this happened when I was a kid, or when I heard that particular thing, growing up, or when I had these particular ideas and experiences, that was that kind of, just letting me know it was, you know what I'm saying? I don't want to put too many of my things on you, but one of the core competencies that I want to talk about in the book is how to track, how to listen, how to look back on your own life. Where are your markers? What are your markers? They're there. What could they be?
I want to say something about inspiration and how inspiration is, it's so available, and you were mentioning before there were two things. What was suffering and what was the other one?
Meditation.
And meditation. But there's also inspiration that's available to us that speaks to my soul or calls for, sunrise, sunset. People post pictures on Facebook, and there's like this millisecond experience of wow, of inner wow. And I know it's not my ego wowing about this sunrise. My ego's probably thinking, if I could draw that, maybe I'd be a famous painter, and then but it's just that, or baby, you talked about the being in the presence of that just base level joy that comes with the baby. Or, and you mentioned authors, that when I read Man's Search for Meaning, it's almost like you can feel a yes, an internal yes, resonating with that inspiration that is not coming from the neck up. And those experiences are available to us, and that actually we trip over in each other, that we can sharpen listening to. Obviously, we're sitting here today because there's that available in this time, and we do seek that from one another. We do seek that. So there's that, and I'm sure we can think of a million examples of how we're touched by that just on a daily basis, and that also keeps the soul speaking to us, responding to that.
Yeah, or it's like it is the soul speaking to us. The inspiration it's like a little peek into something, like a whole different world in there, almost, like that's what I think of as inspiration. In a way, it's like a way of seeing, like, whoa, that.
Notice.
Yeah, noticing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's just been my word lately. Just notice. Notice this.
I'm working on a chapter, the chapter, The Soul is Countercultural. And I've got stuck on this idea of the ordinary. And so we're kind of touching on that right now, that it's almost like in every little thing that we see, there's something behind it that is like a whole new, a whole way. It's like it flips your way of seeing. So, for example, maybe you've seen that there's a video that I saw, of course, on stupid Facebook where they take. I think there's somebody maybe lying in the grass or something, and then the camera goes way up, and then it's then we see the Earth and the solar system, and then and then to all of the galaxies like spinning around the furthest that we've been able to see, and then it stops, and then it comes back, and then it goes to I forget if it's a blade of grass or if it's something inside the person, but goes
Down
into the
inside.
total
It's inner eye.
inner eye. Okay, the micro.
Yeah, yeah.
And that then you're like, oh, because
There's a whole universe
The whole
inside the
universe
cellular
inside, yeah.
eye and everything. Yeah,
yeah.
that's so cool.
And so it's such a great illustration of how if you're observing in a certain way, you are open to a whole world of wonder. And just doing like a body meditation, like sometimes I'll just go through the systems of the body, like thinking about breathing and what respiration is, and how we have these organs that take in gases and convert them into, and what a wonder it is, like what a complete and utter mystery. So you can like get blissed out on on that kind of, and the ordinary thing, what we consider ordinary is like this invitation into a mind-blowing kind of experience of reality. This is not even made up. This is like just in our natural environment. And so I just did it again. I just went out on a limb and
We're with you.
don't know why, how to land the plane.
Noticing.
Noticing, thank you. That's what it was. It's noticing. And so that's it. And it's the noticing that is the invitation to a deep dive almost every time.
And say more about the ordinary.
Well,
Where my mind, maybe I'm prompting, but where my mind goes with that is that lack of judgment place. Instead of like, oh, that's a beautiful sunrise, just
Well,
letting everything. I don't know how to reconcile it in my mind, but let everything be beautiful, and so it feels ordinary, but I still have the joy of the experience of the noticing.
yeah, it's like paradox, because there's no such thing as ordinary in some ways. It's all spectacular. You know what I'm saying? If you're seeing it correctly. So, but the example that I'm using in this chapter, I stumbled across it, but so it's the story of how I was a pastor one time, and how we had this dwindling little church that was about to fail. And our friends who were the pastors were like, we're out of here. Like they just got really, they were discouraged by lots of things, and they left. And I was secretly hoping that it would shut down so we could go be cool down the street. And this group wanted to stay together, and I don't know how Ted was feeling, but I was like, I'm tired of small church, I'm tired of this whole deal, and maybe they'll just vote to, let's just shut it down. And no, they wanted to stay together. And so I just volunteered, basically. I was like, well, okay, but we're not going to be some stinking little house church. I didn't say this, but this is my attitude. We're not going to be a little house church. We'll hold this thing together till we get somebody who can make us into a real church, basically, was my attitude. And then I had been doing some preaching, and I sort of enjoyed it, and I didn't want people to have the freedom to say what they thought.
Because we tried that. Something
We
called
tried
open
that.
church. We tried having whoever wanted to talk get up and talk.
And of course, that wasn't cool. So,
Nobody wants to do that.
you know,
People just gotta
apart
talk
from the
their angst out
you know,
there.
from
It's really
apart from the
uninspiring.
Quakers who seemed to do this just fine, I didn't have any tolerance for that. And apart from lots of traditions who have it's a sacred practice that they have, that was not going to work for me.
They just had a better spirit than you did.
I know,
obviously.
for God's sake, yes. So anyway, I decided to first I volunteered to get somebody to speak, and then I got inspired to speak, and so then I just was doing the sermons, and it was like this magical experience. It was magical to me where I would just sit down. What I used as a template was, I got nothing but Jesus, right? So let's just look at him. How about, can we do that? What if we did that? For a whole, however it takes. So I was like, what about his life? What about his death? What about all the rest? And just kind of that was the only template I had. And so started doing that, and it was like, well, my experience of this, like, magical land inside the ordinary, they used to have these books called The Magic Eye, these pictures that, two-dimensionally, they were just these weird sort of abstract, colorful pictures, but if you stare at it long enough, and you stare correctly in the right way, it would, like,
Statue of Liberty.
yeah, it's
Or
Statue
something.
of Liberty,
Yeah.
or like,
Words.
yeah, it would just kind of, you'd see this whole different world
Either.
inside
That's the metaphor.
inside this two-dimensional picture. You could see this whole different world, and that's what the whole year was for me. And so every time I'd just be like, this is amazing, and
it was.
It kind of was, and I would, and because of the way that turns out my soul talks to people, is that I don't get to have an outline, and I don't get to practice, and I don't get to have notes. So that was like excruciating for 52 weeks. But what would happen was something would happen. It was just really amazing. And then and the way we would be with each other, so we'd do that, and then we'd go play volleyball. We just had this lovely little community that was, it felt to me kind of magical, but we were nothing. Like, in the vineyard, we did not exist. Like, nobody called us, nobody asked us anything. No, can we support you? Do you want to be on it? Nothing.
Pay association fees, nothing.
Yeah, nothing. And we didn't have a Sunday school program. We didn't have marketing. We didn't have anything. We had these raggedy old, like, overhead projector things for our song. We were just ordinary dorks, really. Jesus nerds. And 52 weeks that I felt like we were sort of walking in this magical thing. And then we hired our guy, and he came, and we thought, here's our baby we kept for you, And he showed up and immediately started trying to make us cool, because it was embarrassing. So we quit having potlucks, and we worked on our marketing, and we got good signage, and we had a
Good slide projectors.
We had a great slide. It was like all of those things, and I felt like this is the story I'm telling. I felt like that what we did was we had this great secret recipe taco food truck that we had, and we didn't know that it was great, and so we decided to trade it in for a Taco Bell franchise instead, and didn't really realize what we were doing. And I stumbled across this because I was looking through some old emails, and we had this man who had come, like, I think we started in November. He came in like February and left in like August or something because he had to move. But right around when our new pastor came, he wrote us a letter, and he said, hey, I guess your new pastor's coming. I hope that works out really great. And you guys are turning, into a new phase, blah, blah, blah. But personally, I'm sad. Kind of sad about it. Because maybe you don't know what you have here. And he talks about his first day. It always makes me cry. Sorry. But he talks about his first day. How he came in, and he's like, 5 people said hello to him. And he figured the first guy was probably the pastor, because that's what the pastor's job is, right? And he talked about how wonderful it was, and then he found out that we were this little struggling little church who had lost its pastor. And he's like, that's not right. That can't happen. Like, the vitality that's here and the joy that's here, like, that's not even possible. And they hire people to come in and help churches who don't have a pastor survive, and do these people know what they have here? That's basically, his thing. And anyway, then the story, of course, gets sad because the person who came in that was supposed to be the big deal, didn't have any eyes to see that. We just handed him our precious little baby, and he's like, okay, we better put this thing on the map. And in the process, then we lost there, because he didn't see it, he didn't value it. It was just a platform for him to build on. And that's what broke my heart, really, just broke my heart. So on paper, then, really, we were nothing. And even if he hadn't come, we would not have been able to sustain that. You know what I'm saying? It was this, Land of Oz or something that we entered into, partly because we were just so flippin' ordinary. And there were plenty of people came and went and didn't stay because we were just ordinary. We were just not. But we experienced it as magical and spiritual and valuable and the pearl of great price, so to speak. And so that kind of, the soul's way of seeing is like that. The invitation is, hey, let's look again at this thing. Let's look again at your life. What's in front of you? What are you in? What breakdown is happening for you? Is that really a disaster, or is this an invitation, or is the soul's invitation is to see the magic eye, is to stare at a thing long enough until it transforms into a whole different, parallel universe almost. And that could just be paradigm shifts, but how you choose to listen and the values that you choose to bank on will determine what you experience in your life on this earth. And my contention is that the soul has its own little thing, and we're always invited. And if we can listen, if we can hear, if we can orient toward the things that we wouldn't ordinarily see or care about or value, those very things are the keys to the kingdom, so to speak. Those very things are the openings that your soul is offering you, and you then get invited, but to, shake up your whole existence. So that's what I mean by the ordinary. I think we're surrounded every day by these little windows, these little, invitations, and we can enter that and become inspired, nourished, whatever, and that leads to a whole different way of living. So
there's a great book written by a Buddhist, one of my former teachers, Jack Kornfeld. I still love him. And it talks about everything you just said about what's the flip between the spectacular and the ordinary. And isn't it really a dialectic experience? And the name of his book is After the Ecstasy, the Laundry.
yeah, that's what it is. After the
Yeah.
ecstasy of laundry.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So anyway, we are over time already. So I want to thank you. I'm going to be able to end and thank you for participating.
Thanks,
Yeah.
What a
Phyllis.
great conversation.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Such good stuff.
Yeah.
And our landlord did message me back and say he's really sorry. He's fixing it.
Well, it's doing
Yeah.
it even
to
if
be
even
happy enough, I guess.
No, it's been doing it for a while.
I think it was Christmas.